Hello everyone! Today I'm transferring this beautiful orchid out of its original container, this came from Trader Joe's, and into a vase with water. So technically this will become a hydroponic orchid, I hope. This was a gift from hubby. He brought it back from one of his frequent trips to Trader Joe's. It was relatively cheap, probably between $10 and $15. And since it came from a supermarket, I'm not really sure how well it was nurtured. But I've had this now for about 4 months and the blooms have been beautiful and now they're starting to fall off. So it's time to repot. The orchid was planted in sphagnum moss and it's hard to tell what's happening at the root level. I've read that orchids don't do so well in sphagnum moss. They do much better in tree bark or coconut husk. So she's going to need to get repotted anyway. And once I get her out of the container, I'll be able to see how healthy her roots are or not. I've been careful not to overwater her, but still, you never know what's going on below soil level. The orchid came with a Dracaena marginata plant, which I will also need to repot. By the way, if your orchid is still putting out new buds and flowers, most people recommend not to transplant it yet. Wait until it's done flowering. When the plant is still blooming, the energy is put into the flower spike and into producing flowers. You want to transplant when that stage is done and the plant is putting its energy back into the vegetative growth and roots. Here's the plant a few months later. Actually, this plant kept flowering for many months and gave us a lot of blooms, but now it's done flowering for the time being. And here we have the plant with 2 flower spikes and no more flowers. Now, the first question is what to do with the flower spikes. This plant has 2, and first I need to examine if there are any potential buds on the nodes, and there are, so I'm going to prune the spike about 1 inch above the nodes. I've seen conflicting opinions on this. Some say that if you have 2 flower spikes, then cut 1 at the base. And the American Orchid Society confirms that this species of orchid, the Phalaenopsis, can rebloom from an old spike. So I'm going to leave these, but I'll watch them carefully. These spikes are green and look healthy, but if they brown up, then I will definitely snip them off. Now let's take a look at how this was potted up. I'm not sure what I'm going to find once I start taking this apart. It looks like it was planted in some type of moss material, and I need to get all of that stuff off before transferring the plant into a hydroponic environment. I've never grown orchids hydroponically, only vegetable plants, so this is an experiment, which is always fun. But I've done a little research, and it seems that instead of calling this hydroponics, it's called water culture. To me, it's the same thing. Hydroponics is water culture, right? The orchid growing community uses terms like full water culture versus semi-water culture. They don't typically use terms like DWC, NFT, or cracky. I'm going to use what seems to be called semi-water culture for this experiment, and that is to let the plant roots stay in a small amount of water for 5 days, and then pour out the water and let the roots dry out for 2 days, and then repeat the cycle. Another method would be the opposite of this, and that would be to let the plant roots stay in a larger amount of water, but for only 2 days, and then dry out for 5 days. So it's letting the roots soak in less water for more time, or more water for less time. I opted for less water and more time, so 5 days soaking in about 1 inch of water, and then 2 days drying out period. Orchids are very slow growers, so it might take some time to see new roots and new flowers, but the important thing is that the roots continue to grow and look healthy. That's actually an advantage of growing orchids this way. You can see the roots, and if there are any problems, you can attend to it more quickly. If the orchid is growing in media where you can't see the roots, then you won't know if the roots are suffering until it's too late. I also like the way the roots look. I think the plant looks really cool with the roots in a glass vase. So to get started, the first thing I need to do is take off all of this moss and clean the roots very well so there's nothing on them that can cause the roots to rot or decay. I'll also look and make sure the roots are all healthy. If there are any decaying roots, I'm going to cut those off. And here they are. The roots are as clean as I can get them, and over the next week or so, some of the moss that's still clinging to the roots will drop off, and since I'll be changing out the water every week, eventually the roots will be nice and clean. In terms of the vase to put the orchid in, other growers suggest a vase with a narrow neck to help keep the humidity high in the vase and to prevent the water from evaporating too much. But if you don't have that type of vase, I think it's okay. Just keep an eye on the roots to see that they're growing nice and green. It really is very cool to see these roots. Here you can see the orchid after it's been repotted in water, and I didn't yet prune the spikes, so now I'm going to snip the flower spike under where the flowers have already bloomed, and hopefully I'll get a second flush of flowers from these spikes. Time will tell. And now let's leave the plant alone for 5 days. Okay, here it is 5 days later, and so far so good. The roots have turned greener, and the plant looks fine. Now I'm going to spill out the water and let the plant roots dry out for 2 days. All right, here we are 2 days later, and you can see the roots have turned a silvery gray color. They've been out of the water and drying out. So now I'm going to add about 1 inch of water so the bottom roots can get it, and let them soak in the water for 5 days. Then dump the water out and give them another 2-day drying cycle. And continue. To make it easy for me to remember, I let the roots dry out from Friday late afternoon until Sunday late afternoon. Friday is when I usually tend to my house duties, which includes plants, so it works with my schedule. Here you can see I just added some water after a 2-day drying out period, and the roots are still silvery gray, but they will green up pretty quickly. And now it's the next day, and you can see the roots are greening up. If any of them start to turn brown or rot, I'll know that right away and I'll cut that off. But for now, I'm just watching them. And here they are 5 days later and a lot greener. Time for their 2-day drying out period. I'm going to continue with this experiment. For me, it's an experiment since I've never grown hydroponic orchids before. And it's always fun to see what will happen. So I'll update this video if anything happens, good or bad, I'll let you know. Until then, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.